The handcuffs made a cold, metallic click as they closed around my father's wrists. His face, the same face that once beamed with pride at my kindergarten graduation, now twisted with rage and disbelief. My mother sobbed quietly, her mascara creating dark rivers down her cheeks as the officer guided her toward the door. My sister Kimberly stood frozen, her mouth open in silent protest, while her husband Bradley struggled against the restraints, shouting obscenities that echoed through the house. My house. The one they'd broken into. The one they thought they could take from me. I stood in the corner of my living room, arms crossed tightly against my chest, watching as my entire family was escorted out in handcuffs. Their friends, witnesses to this family implosion, were being led out too, their faces a mixture of shock and embarrassment. And in that moment, surrounded by the aftermath of betrayal, I felt something I never expected: relief. But family doesn't turn on family overnight. This story had been building for years, brick by brick, lie by lie, until the foundation of trust crumbled beneath our feet. My name is Reese. At 32, I was the family nomad, the sales rep who lived out of suitcases and hotel rooms, existing in a perpetual state of transition. 3 weeks of every month found me in conference rooms across the country, selling products I believed into people I barely knew. The remaining week was spent in my apartment, trying to recover from the constant motion before jumping back on another plane. That apartment, God, I can still hear the chaos. The walls were tissue paper thin, a living museum of other people's lives. My neighbor's alarm blared through the drywall at 5:30 every morning. The couple upstairs fought like they were auditioning for a reality show, their arguments becoming the soundtrack to my evenings. Their children seemed to have discovered that hardwood floors make excellent drums when you're wearing soccer cleats at 9 p.m. All I wanted was silence. Just one moment of pure, uninterrupted quiet where I could hear my own thoughts without someone else's life intruding. I'd been saving for years, hoarding every commission check like a squirrel preparing for winter. My diet consisted mainly of canned beans and coffee. Vacations were foreign concepts. New clothes were luxuries I couldn't justify. Every extra dollar went straight into my savings account, feeding a dream that kept me going through red-eye flights and lonely hotel nights. I wanted a house. Nothing extravagant, just a modest home with sturdy walls and a yard where I could breathe without feeling watched. A place where neighbors understood the concept of personal space and quiet evenings weren't mythical creatures. So I called Christopher, my realtor friend, and gave him my wish list. Medium-sized house, nothing flashy. A decent yard, thick walls, and most importantly, a neighborhood where people respected each other's peace. While Christopher hunted for my sanctuary, I decided to visit my parents. The guilt had been gnawing at me. I hadn't seen them in months, too busy crisscrossing the country with my sample cases and PowerPoint presentations. They lived in a small house across town, a place that had once been home but now felt like a stage where I was always performing the role of disappointing daughter. As I pulled into the driveway, my stomach tightened at the sight of Kimberly's minivan already parked there. Of course she was there. My older sister practically lived at our parents' house, a constant presence with her husband Bradley and their 2 children, Jackson, 6, and Emma, 4. The moment I walked through the door, I was hit by a wall of noise. Jackson raced through the living room, a toy car clutched in his hand as he made engine noises loud enough to drown out actual traffic. Emma sat at the coffee table, coloring with markers, not on paper, but directly on the polished wood surface. Kimberly sprawled on the couch, eyes half closed, looking like she'd been awake for 3 days straight. Bradley sat in the corner, his attention completely absorbed by his phone. And there was Mom in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove, her shoulders slightly stooped from years of carrying everyone else's burdens while pretending they weren't heavy. Dinner that night was predictable. The conversation orbited around Kimberly and her kids like planets around a sun. Mom gushed about Jackson's reading skills, how he was tackling chapter books well beyond his years. Dad made silly faces at Emma, encouraging her to giggle and spill juice across the tablecloth. Kimberly complained about the rising cost of everything, groceries, children's clothes, after-school activities, while Bradley nodded in solemn agreement between mouthfuls of mashed potatoes. I sat quietly, fork pushing food around my plate, waiting for a pause, a breath, a moment when I might actually exist in my family's consciousness. Finally, when Jackson knocked over his juice and everyone scrambled for napkins, I saw my opening. I have some news too, I said, my voice sounding foreign even to my own ears. I'm planning to buy a house. The silence that followed was absolute. Jackson stopped whining about his wet shirt. Emma's fork halted midair. Even Bradley looked up from his phone. I expected congratulations. Maybe a hug from Mom. A proud nod from Dad. Something, anything, that acknowledged this milestone in my life. Instead, I watched something dark and unfamiliar creep across their faces. Kimberly's expression hit me hardest, pure, undiluted jealousy mixed with something that looked alarmingly like hatred. Mom set down her fork with deliberate slowness. A house. Reese? You don't need a house. You're traveling all the time anyway. What's the point? You can just keep renting. The dismissal in her voice stung like a slap. What do you mean I don't need a house? I asked, genuinely confused. Everyone wants their own place eventually. Kimberly's voice cut through the air, sharp as broken glass. I need a house way more than you do. I have kids, Reese. Kids need space, their own rooms to play. You're just one person who's never even home. I looked at her, trying to process what I was hearing. Kimberly, what are you talking about? I'm saying your future house should be mine. I deserve it more. I have a family. My eyes darted around the table, waiting for someone, anyone, to tell Kimberly she was being ridiculous. But Dad was nodding like she just delivered profound wisdom. Bradley nodded too, suddenly invested in the conversation. Even Mom's face showed agreement. She's right, Reese, Dad said, using the tone that had always signaled I was in trouble as a child. You don't have a family. You don't have children. You work all the time and can't even keep a boyfriend long enough to settle down. Kimberly needs that house more than you do. I felt like I'd stepped into someone else's life. This couldn't be real, my own family suggesting I didn't deserve the thing I'd worked years for. Are you all serious right now? My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. I'm buying this house with my own money that I earned working 60-hour weeks and living in hotel rooms for years. Family should help family, Mom said, as if that explained everything. Kimberly's struggling with 2 young children. I'm not giving my house to anyone, I said, feeling heat rise to my face. I've worked my ass off for this. I've saved for years. This is my dream, and I'm making it happen for me. Dad's face reddened, that familiar danger sign from childhood. You're being selfish, Reese. You live alone. You have no responsibilities except work. You can live perfectly fine in that apartment. I think you've all lost your minds, I said, standing so abruptly my chair teetered behind me. This is absolutely insane. I retreated to the guest room, my hands trembling as I gathered my purse and overnight bag. Their voices carried from the dining room angry whispers about my selfishness, my failure to understand family obligations. Reese, where are you going? Mom called as I headed for the door. We're not done talking about this. Yes, we are, I replied without turning around. Don't you dare walk out on us, Kimberly shouted after me. We're your family. But I was already in my car, engine starting, tires crunching over the gravel driveway. I drove back to my noisy apartment with shaking hands, the echo of their demands playing on repeat in my mind. That night, my phone buzzed incessantly. Missed calls and text messages piled up, Mom's lengthy guilt trips, Dad's curt demands to call back, and Kimberly's vicious attacks, calling me heartless and selfish for not helping her get a house. I deleted every message without responding and threw myself into work, grateful for the business trip that would take me away from this nightmare for 2 weeks. When I returned, the universe delivered a gift in the form of a call from Christopher. Reese, I found something perfect for you, he said, excitement vibrating in his voice. 3-bedroom house with a huge backyard, quiet street, amazing neighbors. The owners are moving out of state and want to sell fast. That Saturday, Christopher drove me to see the house. The moment I laid eyes on it, something inside me clicked into place, like finding a puzzle piece I hadn't realized was missing. White siding, red front door, and a yard shaded by massive oak trees that must have witnessed decades of seasons. Inside was even better. The previous owners had left behind furniture that made designer showrooms look amateur, a plush sectional sofa in the living room, matching armchairs positioned around a coffee table that didn't have a single crayon mark. The kitchen gleamed with granite countertops that caught the sunlight streaming through spotless windows. The bedrooms were spacious sanctuaries with soft carpets that muffled footsteps. "The neighbors are fantastic," Christopher told me as we wandered through. "Mrs. Whitmore on the left is this sweet elderly lady who's lived here for 20 years. The family on the right has teenage kids who are incredibly respectful." When he quoted the price, it hit perfectly within my budget. I could make a substantial down payment and still have enough left for emergencies. "I want to make an offer," I said immediately, the words tumbling out before I could even consider negotiating. The owners accepted that same day. Within 3 weeks, I was signing papers and receiving keys to my very own home. I couldn't believe how smoothly everything had happened, like the universe was finally rewarding me for years of hard work and sacrifice. And I didn't tell my family a single thing about it. After their reaction to the mere idea of me buying a house, they didn't deserve to know I'd actually done it. I wasn't planning to invite them to the housewarming either. Why would I want people there who thought I didn't deserve what I'd earned? Moving day felt surreal. I hired professional movers for my meager apartment belongings, which looked almost comical among the beautiful furniture that came with the house. That first week, I spent hours just wandering from room to room, running my fingers over surfaces, still half expecting someone to tell me there had been a mistake. I could sit in my backyard with morning coffee and hear actual birds instead of honking horns. At night, I slept without earplugs for the first time in years, the silence a luxury I'd almost forgotten existed. After returning from another business trip, I decided it was time to celebrate properly. I planned a housewarming party and invited people who genuinely cared about me, work friends, college buddies, and a few relatives who had always been kind. The party was everything I'd hoped for. We grilled in the backyard, played music at a reasonable volume, and toasted to new beginnings. My guests marveled at the house, congratulating me with genuine happiness that made my heart swell. Then, around 8 o'clock, someone knocked on my front door. I wasn't expecting anyone else, so I went to investigate, still smiling from a joke someone had just told. When I opened the door, that smile died on my lips. There stood my parents, Kimberly and Bradley, dressed in their Sunday best like they'd received formal invitations. "Surprise!" Mom exclaimed with a brittle smile. "We found you." My stomach dropped to my feet. "What are you doing here? How did you even get this address?" Mom waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, we have our ways. Aren't you going to invite us in?" Before I could respond, they pushed past me into my living room, a united front of entitlement that left me momentarily paralyzed. What followed was a masterclass in duplicity. Mom gushed to my relatives about how proud she was of me. "Look what our Reese accomplished. We're so happy for her. She worked so hard for this beautiful home." Dad shook hands with my work friends, playing the role of proud father. "Yes, we always knew she'd do great things. We raised her right, you know." I wanted to scream, to expose their lies. These were the same people who, just weeks earlier, had told me I didn't deserve a house. Now they were pretending they'd supported me all along. But what truly chilled me was watching Kimberly and Bradley separate and begin methodically exploring my home. I followed Kimberly upstairs and found her in my master bedroom, opening closets and peering into bathroom cabinets like she was conducting an inventory. Downstairs, Bradley was examining my kitchen appliances, opening drawers, checking the pantry. They weren't admiring my house, they were studying it, memorizing its layout and contents with predatory focus. They stayed for about an hour, performing their roles as the loving, supportive family. Then they announced they needed to leave because the children were waiting at home with a babysitter. At the door, Mom turned to me with a look of practiced disappointment. "You should be ashamed of yourself, Reese. Not inviting your own family to your housewarming party. Not even telling us you bought a house. That's just wrong. We had to hear about it from others," Dad added. "That's no way to treat your parents." I felt nothing but relief when they finally left. My real friends kept asking why my family seemed so fake and uncomfortable, but I brushed off their questions, not wanting to dampen the celebration with family drama. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into making the house truly mine. I planted flowers along the fence line and bowed stubborn weeds in the garden beds. That's how I properly met Mrs. Whitmore, my neighbor, who called gardening advice over the fence one Saturday morning as I struggled with a particularly stubborn rose bush. "You need to cut it back more," she advised. "Don't be afraid to really trim it." I looked up to see a petite woman with snow-white hair and gardening gloves, probably in her 70s but with a vitality that made her seem younger. "I'm Reese," I said, walking to the fence. "I just moved in a few weeks ago. I'm Diane Whitmore, but you can call me Mrs. Whitmore." We became fast friends. I told her about my traveling job, and she promised to keep an eye on my house during my absences. It was comforting knowing someone trustworthy was watching over my property. 2 months of peaceful homeownership passed. Then came another business trip, this one scheduled for 2 weeks. I informed Mrs. Whitmore of my departure dates, and she assured me she'd monitor things. The first week passed uneventfully. But on Wednesday night of the second week, my phone rang just after 11 o'clock. "Reese, dear," Mrs. Whitmore's voice was tense. "I'm sorry to call so late, but there are people in your house right now. I can see lights on and I'm hearing music." My heart lurched. "What? Are you sure?" "I'm positive. There are definitely people inside. I can hear voices and music playing." Part of me wanted to believe she was mistaken. Maybe she'd seen reflections from a passing car, or perhaps her television was louder than she realized. "I appreciate you calling," I said carefully, "but I think you might be mistaken. There's no way anyone could get into my house." The line went silent for a moment. "Well, if you don't believe me," she replied coldly, "then I won't bother telling you anything else." She hung up. I finished my business trip with nagging anxiety. When I returned home, everything looked normal. No broken windows, no kicked-in doors, no missing valuables. The house was clean and undisturbed. I felt terrible about doubting Mrs. Whitmore. The next morning, I bought a peace offering, an apple pie from the local bakery, and went to apologize. She welcomed me with surprising warmth, then led me to her kitchen table where her phone sat. "I recorded it that night," she said, pressing play on a video. The footage was dark and grainy, shot through her window, but I could clearly see my house with lights glowing inside. Shadows moved across the windows, unmistakably human figures. My stomach twisted into knots. "Oh my God, Mrs. Whitmore, I'm so sorry I didn't believe you. Can you tell who those people are?" The video was too dark to identify faces. "I can't tell, but this is definitely real." She sent me the video, and I went home deeply disturbed. How had someone entered without leaving any trace? That afternoon, I called a security company. By the next morning, tiny hidden cameras were installed at every entrance, around the perimeter, and in the main living areas, all connected to an app on my phone. For a month, nothing happened. I checked the footage obsessively at first, then less frequently as days passed without incident. Maybe whoever had broken and wouldn't return. Then came another business trip. This time I felt prepared. My security system would catch any intruders, and Mrs. Whitmore was on alert. 3 days into the trip, my phone rang late at night. "Reese, I'm seeing people in your house again." Mrs. Whitmore's voice was urgent. "I can hear music and voices." My heart pounded as I opened the security app. What I saw on the live feed made my blood run cold. There were indeed people in my living room, but not strangers. My parents sat on my sofa, drinking wine from my glasses. Kimberly and Bradley moved through the space with comfortable familiarity. They'd brought friends too, probably Kimberly and Bradley's social circle, creating a full-blown party in my absence. I watched, stunned, as my sister gave her friends a tour of my home like it belonged to her. Bradley played bartender behind my kitchen counter, mixing drinks from my liquor cabinet. Dad lounged in my favorite armchair while Mom arranged appetizers on my dining table. My initial instinct was to call and scream at them to get out. But as rage built inside me, I decided they deserved worse than angry words. I dialed 911. "There are strangers in my house right now," I told the dispatcher, my voice steadier than I expected. "I'm out of town on business, and people have broken in illegally. They're having a party in my living room." Are you watching this happen right now, ma'am? Yes, I have security cameras. I can see them on my phone. There are about 8 people in my house drinking and partying. Officers are on their way. Stay on the line and keep watching your cameras so you can update us on what's happening. I watched with grim satisfaction as police cars pulled up outside my house 10 minutes later. 2 officers approached my front door and knocked forcefully. Inside, everyone froze. The music stopped abruptly, and faces turned toward the door with expressions of confusion. Bradley answered, visibly nervous, gesturing animatedly as he spoke to the officers. They stepped inside, and I watched as they questioned everyone in my living room. My parents looked shocked. Kimberly's face crumpled. The friends they brought looked terrified and confused. Then things escalated. Bradley, clearly intoxicated, began arguing with one of the officers. His body language grew aggressive, pointing, leaning forward, invading the officer's space. Ma'am, one of the individuals is becoming belligerent with our officers, the dispatcher informed me. We're calling for backup. Bradley made the fatal mistake of shoving the police officer, a moment of drunken stupidity that changed everything. The officer immediately secured Bradley in handcuffs while he struggled and shouted. More police cars arrived. One by one, everyone was escorted outside. Kimberly sobbed openly, my parents looked shell-shocked, and their friends appeared mortified as they were led to separate patrol cars. About 30 minutes later, my phone rang again, this time, a police officer. Ms. Reese, this is Officer Bennett. We've detained several individuals found in your home tonight. They claimed they had permission to be there and that you gave them keys. Is this true? Absolutely not, I said firmly. I never gave anyone permission to be in my house. I never gave anyone keys. They broke in illegally. The individuals are claiming to be your family members. They say there's been a misunderstanding. They are my family, but that doesn't give them the right to break into my house. I want them prosecuted to the full extent of the law. We'll be holding them overnight. You can come to the station tomorrow to file a formal complaint. As soon as I hung up, my phone exploded with calls and texts. Mom, Reese, we're at the police station. You need to tell them this is all a misunderstanding. Call us back right now. Dad, this is ridiculous. Tell the police you gave us permission to use the house. Kimberly sent a barrage of messages. I can't believe you called the police on your own family. My kids are with Bradley's parents and I can't get to them. You're destroying our lives. I read every message and laughed without humor. They actually expected me to lie to the police and bail them out after what they'd done. I called my director and explained I needed to return home for a family emergency. The next day, I flew back and went straight to my house. It was a disaster zone, wine glasses scattered across surfaces, food crumbs ground into my furniture, empty bottles littering the kitchen counters. They hadn't had time to clean up before their arrest. At the police station, my family looked disheveled and desperate after a night in holding cells. When they saw me walk in, they all started talking simultaneously. Reese, thank God you're here, Mom said. Tell them this is all a mistake. You need to explain to these officers that we had permission, Dad commanded. Kimberly was crying. My babies are asking for me. I need to get home to my children. Bradley just glared at me, bloodshot eyes burning with hatred. I turned to the investigating officer. I want to make it clear that I never gave any of these people permission to be in my house. I never gave them keys. They somehow entered my house illegally and used it for parties while I was traveling for work. My parents' faces drained of color. Kimberly's sobbing intensified. Bradley looked murderous. Reese, stop this nonsense, Dad tried one last time. Tell them the truth, that you gave us the keys and then got mad about something stupid. I am telling the truth, I replied calmly. They broke into my house. In the end, I didn't push for maximum penalties because I couldn't bear the thought of my nephews suffering more than they already had. I asked that my family be released on bail, but they still faced consequences for their actions. A few days later, the police called with the full story, worse than I'd imagined. Your sister made impressions of your house keys during your housewarming party, the officer explained. She used modeling clay to make molds, then had duplicate keys made. The betrayal had been premeditated from the beginning. They also had inside information about your travel schedule. Your sister apparently has a friend in your company's HR department who leaked your itinerary. My family avoided prison but received hefty fines. The incident was reported to Bradley's employer, resulting in his termination. Kimberly lost the friends who'd been arrested with them, furious about being unwitting accomplices to a crime. My parents tried calling for weeks, but I never answered. Kimberly sent lengthy emails about how I'd ruined her life and her marriage. I deleted them all. I changed every lock, installed a state-of-the-art security system, and grew closer to Mrs. Whitmore, who became the family I chose rather than the one I was born into. I should have recognized them from your housewarming party, she said one day over tea in my garden. Don't blame yourself, I assured her. I never imagined my own family would do something like this either. Now, as I sit in my peaceful backyard watching butterflies flutter between the flowers I planted, I realize something profound. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you most are the ones who will hurt you deepest. But sometimes, standing up for yourself and protecting what you've worked for leads you to discover who your real family actually is. Thanks for listening, and if you liked this story, share it with others who might need the courage to protect their boundaries, and don't forget to comment and subscribe for more stories about finding your strength when the people closest to you let you down. Remember, sometimes the family we choose gives us more love than the family we're born into.